Today I effed up by losing my entire life savings of over $600,000 to a rapidly developing gambling addiction and not being able to afford the taxes I now owe. This may be a lengthy story as I'm going to outline how this happened from the bliss my life was before through the descent into chaos and where I am now. I, 38M, had at one point amassed over $500,000 in a retirement account with over $100,000 in cash in my checking account. To start, many of you will immediately wonder how I even got in that situation, so let me give a little backstory. I'm an IT professional with a background in software engineering, although currently in management. I make six figures and have since I was in my late 20s. I'm generally frugal, save way more than the average person, and don't buy a lot of lavish things. I keep to myself most of the time, go out on occasion and buy quality on the things I use the most but don't overindulge. Doing this has led to a happy and generally successful life where I never had to worry about losing my job for even a year, much less where my next meal was coming from. I always knew that if shit really hit the fan, I had enough money to survive for years. I've always enjoyed the occasional casino trip, probably more than my friends, but it was never really a problem. That is until mid last year. I was a casual gambler playing mostly parlor table games when one day I went to the casino with $600 and sat down at an ultimate Texas Hold'em game where I proceeded to win non-stop for hours. I continuously upped my bets and kept winning. Eventually I was betting table max, $3,000 altogether with the various bets. The table was drawing attention. I was on a high. Everybody was winning, because the dealer was just losing, and I was winning the most. A straight, followed by a full house, followed by another straight and another full house. Shit, I was playing max bets, raising my bet 4x blind, without even looking at my cards, and would still win. Sometimes only with a high card. I could not lose. The table was all cheering me on because when I'd win another $2,000 or so I'd toss $100 chips to the others at the table as a kind gesture. The largest chips they had at the table were $500 chips. They ran out and had to order a refill. This happened 6 times. 6 times they ran out of money for the players at our table and had to keep bringing more in. To avoid too much attention, I would shove the $500 chips into my pocket and play only with the ones on the table. Any new winnings went into my pocket out of sight. At one point, they decided to change the cards, which takes about 20 minutes, so I got up to go to the bathroom. I thought my pants were going to sag from the weight of the chips. They filled my pockets so much I worried they might just spill out of my pockets. I later found out that the pit bosses were getting calls from security asking them to keep an eye on me because they were suspicious that I might be cheating. And they said the security reviewed the footage of that night for days afterwards trying to see what was going on. When I finally stood up from the table, I had won over $30,000 from my original $600 buy-in. That was a high I didn't know was possible. I could buy a car with that or anything I wanted really. But then I already could. There was nothing I wanted that I couldn't already have bought. The $30,000 didn't matter. I found out later that because I was betting so much, for so long, my tier status went to the highest level, and that came with tons of perks like a free cruise, free golf trips at a local private club, and over $3,000 in food comps which were valid at even the fancy casino restaurants like their steakhouse. I would eventually treat all my friends to multiple fancy dinners with this money. With nothing I wanted to spend the money on, I decided to go back again the next weekend. This time I played slots and table games, all sorts of things, and again won more. Everything I touched won. Slots were paying me hand pays right and left. People recognized me from before and would stop to hear the story. I won another $20,000 over the course of the month, mostly on slots, with bets ranging from $5 to $60 a spin. It was all cash. Literal paper cash in my closet in $10,000 bundles, just sitting there with no purpose other than to be used on more casino trips. My friends all told me how lucky I was and loved to tell the story. It's fun to tell stories about sticking it to the casino. Everybody loves a good winner story. My friends all knew I had nearly $50,000 in cash in my closet. I had just bought a house and started fixing things up. I spent about $40,000 on the house, covering paint, appliances, flooring, etc. When I spent that money, though, I was careful to use my card and save the cash for future casino trips. In the weeks that followed, I'd slowly lose more and more of that $50,000 wad of cash. It became $40,000, then $35,000, and I kept thinking, oh shit, if my friends ask to see the cash, I'm going to need an excuse for why I don't have it anymore. I should probably try to win some back at the tables again. Which I know just as well as you do now that this is a ridiculously stupid thing to even think, much less attempt. Eventually my mom would fly into town to visit me, and she lives in a state without casinos and enjoys going as well. She mentioned over and over how she couldn't wait to go to the casino and see how lucky I am. I had to make up an excuse for why I didn't have all the money I told about in my stories. I felt guilty and dirty lying about something as trivial as losing $15,000, but I didn't want anybody to know I gave some back like an idiot. Caving in to this feeling of shame and accepting my willingness to hide it would ultimately be my downfall. After my mother left, I had no other people to be accountable to. The casino offered me $250 every week and $250 every weekend in free play. I proceeded to go back to the casino twice a week. Of course, to collect the free play, but with my betting habits of occasionally betting $10 to $50 a spin, that amount of money can last anywhere from 3 minutes to literal seconds. Once it's gone, I'm at the cashier asking for money because I'm withdrawing $3,000 at a time. An amount the ATM machines didn't allow me to take. I lost the money over and over. Week after week, losing $3,000 or even $10,000. One day I saw my banking app noted, "You spent $30,000 less so far this month than last month," and my heart sank. I knew I needed to stop, and I just needed to bet bigger and have those good days to get me up maybe $20,000 to $30,000 out of my now missing $60 to $80,000, and I just cut my losses there. This logic carried me for months as I spiraled. I stopped going to the casino altogether, and the allure eventually faded. A few months later I discovered online casinos. I thought they were all illegal or didn't accept US customers, until I found one that did. I deposited a few $100 and was able to play slots and table games while laying down in bed at night. The convenience of depositing money straight from my bank account effectively straight into a slot machine was just so easy. Too easy. I eventually lost everything I had in my savings account. I felt empty. I felt nothing. Well, fuck it, what's another $10K at this point? Thought started creeping in. I used a credit card to see if it would even work, and to my disappointment it did. I ran up the limit on my credit card, hoping to win enough to pay it back off. When I reached the max, I requested a limit increase, which was granted, then ran it up again. Out of sources of money, I decided to withdraw money out of my Roth IRA into my personal account. The wire took less than 20 minutes the first time. I felt guilty. I felt a rush of anxiety and thrill as I then immediately deposited that money into the online casino. I turned $10K into $0 in a matter of hours. I started depositing increments of $1,000 because that was reasonable and less money, but I'd lose it and do it again minutes later. Again, reasonable small increment. When bills came due, I didn't have the money for them, so I justified another withdrawal from my retirement account. This time it was to pay bills, so I need this. I'd withdraw way more than I needed for the bills and blow the rest. During all of this, there were of course moments where I turned $100 into $20,000 or $1,000 into $10,000 in minutes as well. It wasn't all losses, which is what kept me hooked. If I could turn $100 into $20,000, just think about what I could do with $1,000. I could get it all back. I kept withdrawing money from my retirement account until I had withdrawn so much that the amount left would no longer even cover the taxes I now owed on the income and penalties incurred from early withdrawing money out of my retirement account. I was so ashamed I didn't want anybody to know about any of this. I told no one. My closest friends are all wealthy as I was, but without a gaping hole in their bank accounts. It got harder and harder to keep up with going out to eat and going golfing, etc. My new house doesn't have basic furniture required to host guests, no large sofa, no reasonable dining table. It grew increasingly difficult to justify to all my friends why I haven't had anyone over and why I haven't bought a couch or even basic furniture. The crippling guilt and anxiety over my looming tax obligation forced me to come clean to my best friend. I feel bad for having not said something sooner. It could have saved my future. I'm still reeling in shock with what I've done. It all happened over the course of a single year, with the bulk of it over the last 6 months. I've since stopped entirely. I've got my budget back on track and I have a plan for covering taxes and moving on with my life. Talking to my friend about it put it all into perspective. In hindsight, I feel like I was in a massively depressed fog, not thinking clearly, not caring about my own well-being. It all happened so fast. I will be dealing with the fallout from this for the rest of my life, but the next few months and years will likely be the most difficult as I pay off all the debt I've foolishly accrued and try to get my life back together. I hope this post serves as a reminder to everyone to don't gamble at all because winning might be the worst thing that happens to you.
Today I effed up by calling out my coworker for cheating on his fiancée with my friend. This event happened a little over a month ago, and while things at work have settled down and I admit I made a mistake, I still don't feel resolved about everything. I, 25F, have worked with my coworker, 27F, since 2023. We were always friendly, but I didn't start getting close with her until we started working together in the same classroom this year. About 6 months ago, a new guy started working at our school site. He was great with the kids and attractive, but I heard offhand that he had a fiancée. I didn't think much of it until a few months. One of the teachers in my classroom commented that my coworker, let's call her Ella, and my new coworker, Sam, would make a great couple as they stood side by side talking during a work potluck. I mentioned, I thought Sam has a fiancé, but my coworker assured me that he did not. Another coworker, 3 of us outside Ella, was also in on the scoop, and I mentioned the same comment I overheard, that Sam had a fiancé, but she also debunked it saying, I never heard anything about that. It was few weeks after this that Ella and I started communicating outside of work, and I learned more about her life, which was very tragic. The more I learned about her, the more I liked and admired her, but I also learned that she had some pretty intense anxiety for good reason. It became shared knowledge between my other 2 coworkers that we were rooting for Ella and Sam to get together. After winter break, Ella told me that she and Sam had been texting and meeting up before work for 3 months and expressed anxiety about our workplace finding out. I didn't realize they had gotten to that stage of talking and confirmed to her that it wasn't obvious at all and that our workplace probably wouldn't be very strict about fraternization. She continued to go on about how seriously Sam took this policy and about how he didn't want things to become serious because of the risk to his job. It made Ella very anxious and stressed out to the point she told me she wanted to end things over it. I told her that the risk of something bad happening probably wasn't worth the risk of ending something possibly good, and for her to make sure it wasn't underlying fears that made her want to end things. She told me she was certain on breaking stuff off because if anything happened to Sam's job, she would feel terrible. I supported her in her decision, but she later told me when I followed up about it that he didn't let me LOL. Shortly after this, my first coworker called me in a tizzy because of something concerning she had heard. She had spoken to another male coworker about how his relationship with his wife, both work on site with us, was affected by the no fraternizing policy. This male coworker, quick to dismiss the reasoning for this line of questioning, asked if this had anything to do with Sam and Ella. My coworker said, "What if it did?" And the male coworker says seriously that he has it on good authority that Sam is engaged and that he has spoken to Sam directly about the engagement. My coworker, distressed, talks to both me and my other coworker about it, and how, if it's true, will we tell Ella, who is anxious? I voted that we tell her directly, but my 2 coworkers didn't want to upset her and instead decided that they would tell her to create distance because of conflicting work issues and not mention the unconfirmed potential fiancé. That decision didn't sit well with me, but my attempts to convince my coworker to do otherwise didn't work, so I agreed not to say anything about it. Until the next day during the weekend, Ella excitedly tells me that she asked Sam out on a date and it went really well. I tried to act positive about it, but it felt so disgustingly fake that I had to say something along the lines of, I don't want to say anything, but I think you should pursue this relationship carefully. Which brought out a round of, wait, why would you say that? Did something happen? I told her I didn't want to say, but then she said she was freaking out. Please tell me I'm thinking the worst, and I told her about what we suspected, but didn't know for sure. She became understandably upset and said if it was true she would never be able to show her face at work again, and that she would talk to Sam about it. I also informed my coworker that I messed up and spilled the beans, and she essentially sighed and shrugged. I felt pretty awful on both counts, one that I didn't keep to my agreement, and 2, that I needlessly stressed out Ella, who needed no additional stress in her life. Ella later texted me and said she spoke with Sam and no, he's single, and I was suspicious, but expresses that I was relieved for her. Come Monday, my worker texted me the morning before I came in that she had news to discuss with my other coworker and I in person. She found pictures of Sam's wedding registry for April and a picture of him holding a sold sign with his fiancée in front of their house. I felt absolutely sick with anger, just furious because how freaking dare he. I have big old-fashioned ideals about truth, loyalty, and justice, and the idea of Sam conning both his fiancée and my friend made me see red. My coworkers were just in shock, and they wanted to not say anything and stay out of their business, while I insisted that Ella deserved to know. They didn't want to stress her out, and they also didn't want her to know they had been doing some digging behind their back. I don't remember expressly agreeing to this, but in the light of how much I stressed Ella out the first time I mentioned anything, I decided not to tell her directly. That day, Sam came into our class to work with the kids, and I felt so full of anger towards him. I thought about following him outside to speak with him directly, but dismissed it. Later, after coming out of the restroom, I saw him walking with his student, someone he's training in his position, and without having any idea what the heck I planned to say, I jogged over to him. I spoke very positively and casually to him, and the moment is seared in my mind, so I think I have the conversation close to word for word. Hi Sam, can I speak with you for a moment? He agrees and faces me, with his student standing a few paces away. I consider asking him to speak privately, but that seemed like making it a big deal. In hindsight, I wish I had asked to speak privately. Dude, I can't believe how bullheadedly I handled this conversation, but this is how it went. Do you know fiancé's name Cass? Who? Cass. Cass, last name? Yes. Yeah, I know her. Is she your fiancé? What? Is she your fiancé? Yes. How did you dash? I looked up your wedding registry. You're getting married in April? Oh, yeah. Confused, chuckling. Congratulations. Thank you, dash. Does Ella know? Dead silence. The smile drops from his face. He stares intently at me for like 3 seconds. I stare hard back. I am fueled by self-righteous anger. No. She should know. More silence, then he says without breaking eye contact. We need to talk. We're talking right now. No, Ella and I need to talk. I think I said something like, that's a good idea. Thanks for talking with me, and he says, you're welcome, and without looking at his student who has been standing awkwardly behind Sam this whole time, I walk slowly back to my class, my heart slamming and my hands shaking. I go back to class feeling so out of it, like I couldn't even comprehend what I just did. I look back and coworker number 2, and she can tell by the look on my face that something's up, and I just shake my head. Later I admit I spoke to Sam, and she's flipping out, laughing and getting excited. Her positive reaction makes me feel a little less freaked out about it, and after I explain exactly what I said to both of them, they both cheer me on, you're my hero, and that I handled it well. Welp, an hour later Ella comes up to me, anxious AF, saying, did you talk to Sam? I'm stunned, then I notice coworker number 2 behind her looking somber. I said yes, and she makes a gasp of shock and horror. She asked about what I said, and I told her that it would be best if she heard it directly from him. She asked if I mentioned her name, and I shamefacedly admitted to that as well. She leaves in a fluster, and I feel dread down to my stomach the entire day. I apologize to her during my class after work, to which she replies, I'm not angry at you. I just wish you hadn't used my name. I apologized more, feeling like an absolutely idiot. She never replies. Coworker number 2 texts to ask if I'm okay. I admit I feel stressed and stupid for messing up, and she leaves me on read. I stress about the whole scenario all night long. I talked to my family and my best friend about it, and they said while my heart was in the right place, I shouldn't have interfered, and not to let it get to me. I was so upset about what happened. I didn't sleep, and it wasn't until about 6 a.m. that I stopped guilt-tripping myself and realized, if I was in Ella's shoes, I did what I would have wanted a friend to do for me. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have said anything, and if I could take it back I would, but I acted according to my morals. It helped me feel much more centered. Sometime during my anxiety-ridden night, I had texted coworker 1 about how awful I felt, and that morning she asked if I would like to call and talk about it. I already felt much calmer and agreed, but when she called me, she spent 20 minutes telling me a story about she messed up with a friend and how she felt terrible, but that she learned from the experience in the long run. 10 minutes into that conversation, I was shocked that she didn't really mention her involvement at all, didn't ask me about how I felt, and somehow turned this whole fiasco into a reflection of a lesson she had already learned. She told me to let Ella come to me, and that she would forgive me eventually. I told her I appreciated her and her story, and left it at that, but I felt let down by our conversation. The day at work, no one spoke to me about what happened, and the same thing happened the following day, and the rest of the week, and the following week. I felt like I had lost 3 friendships that day. I felt a little bit like a social pariah, even though no one did anything to really exclude me. We just all pretended like it didn't happen, but they continued to talk about it, just without me. A few weeks later, I finally reached out to Ella to apologize for overstepping. She said she wasn't mad, and that Sam really was single and that he lied to me about being engaged because he was put on the spot. Coworker 1 had shown Ella pictures of Sam with his fiancée, so I don't know how she played that off. She said she also hoped what happened wouldn't affect my view of him. I told her I respected him in a professional manner, but either he was a cheater or a liar, and either way I didn't respect him as a person. She never responded, and that was the end of it. I ended up looking up the wedding registry later in the hopes of being able to contact his fiancée and let her know the situation, after being advised to by my close friends, but Sam had locked it and taken down their photo, and I was never able to find his fiancée's social, so I just let the matter lie. As of now, over a month later, Sam and I don't make eye contact, and my coworkers and I don't talk about it, but it still weighs heavy on me, feeling like I lost something special with all 3 of these people because I no longer trust them.
Today I effed up by getting sloppy drunk at my older crush's party. Okay, so there's a lot of context that goes into this situation before I get into the meat of it all. This is optional to read, skip to the bold text to get to my current situation. I, 21F, met a coworker, 31NB, at a job about a year and a half ago. I instantly thought they were the coolest person ever. They were amazing at their job, had a really cool style, were very outgoing and friendly, and was openly queer. We became pretty good work buddies, and we've hung out outside work a handful of times, and they've given me a lot of really valuable advice. They are living the life that I used to dream of having when I was younger, but sadly gave up the idea of having when I was 18 or so, because I wanted to live a normal life, since I was so miserable constantly fighting with others about the kind of life that I wanted for myself, and so burnt out from getting flack from my family. Not only are they inspiring, but they are also my type. With that being said, I know that I have no chance because they are 10 years older than I am, and I am transferring to a school that's about 6 hours away this upcoming fall semester. I am very grateful to have them as a friend, and despite my overactive imagination, I completely accept that trying to push the boundaries of our casual friendship could end up being really bad. My feelings towards them is also not a conversation that I am willing to have. As a small child, I found myself getting along much better with adults than kids my own age. I was used to being told that I was mature, and just tended to gravitate towards adults and the positive reinforcement that I got from them. In middle school, I had a couple of crushes on kids a few years older than I, that usually ended up in me following them around like an excitable puppy. I annoyed them to no end, and didn't realize this until I was much older. As a high schooler, I presented myself in a way that earned me a lot of new kinds of attention from older folk who shouldn't have been interested in me in the way that they were. Now as an adult, I am really outgoing, but also tend to be kinda socially anxious. This, compounded with some previous mal-experiences I had when I was younger due to queer-related traumas, and growing being undiagnosed with autism until I was 18, tends to lead to situations where I embarrass myself by being too energetic and too excited when I like someone. I've learned to cope with it by trying to avoid people that I like in order to not overwhelm them with how much of a magnetic force I feel towards them. However, my desire for approval and verbal validation and reminders of me not being a burden or gross sometimes gets in the way of this. Fast forward to my current situation. I was invited to my crush's party that they were throwing for 2 of their partners, since their partners' birthdays were around the same time. There were a lot of people there, and I, being 21, was the youngest. Most people there were in their 30s, and because I didn't really know anyone, aside from my friend, 23NB, who came along with me for moral support, I decided to have a drink to calm myself down. The event was fantastic. I met so many like-minded people, those with similar views as I, but were worldly and mature enough to see topics with nuance rather than the kind of black and white attitude that most of my peers approach things with. There were some people who I clearly wasn't the cup of tea for, but there were others that had a profound impact on me with just one conversation. I got to talk to one of the partners of my crush, mid-30s F, who is so cool. She was super kind and she kind of mentioned that she's a musician and is looking to host some sort of music event. It's unclear as to if she was inviting me, since I was quite tipsy at this point and also don't always get social cues, but she was super sweet regardless. Now here's where things get bad. So close to midnight at this point, I'd had maybe 7 drinks over the course of nearly 9 hours, and I decided to have another one before we went inside to play a board game to wind down the evening. This drink hit me like a truck. One of the guests, late 30s M, that I'd been chatting with asked me if I was okay, to which I told him that drink I had just hit me like a truck. At this point, I start panicking, because there aren't many people left at this point, meaning that it's not like I can just talk to somebody else and avoid my crush so that I don't embarrass myself in front of them. Once we were inside the house, I kept asking if there was anything that I could do to help. This was partially because I genuinely like to be useful and like it when I am given tasks, but also as a way to try to pay off the invisible emotional debt that I had given myself for being a burden in my drunkenness. My crush responded that there wasn't anything that I could do to help aside from eat some food. Their girlfriend then asked me if I was cold, and if she could get me a sweater, to which I accepted. As all this was going on, the guy from earlier said to my crush, "Wow, she's really cute," and my crush agreed with him. I got all flustered because my crush had agreed with him, but I wasn't too happy about this stranger who I've never met before calling me cute out of nowhere. It felt infantilizing and possibly like an unwanted pass being made, and in order to calm myself down from the clusterfuck of feelings that I was feeling, I turned around to hide my face and eat my food. By the time that I had walked over to the gaming table, I asked what I could do to help, and if I was okay as a form of reassurance that I wasn't taking up too much space by existing. Normally I don't ask for constant reassurance, and when I do, it is done in much more subtle ways. But because I was drunk, and because it was really late, and I was tired, my ability to be socially suave had gone out the window. This guy then turned around to me and said, "You know, you aren't being annoying, but constantly asking if you are is annoying. You're fine." Now, normally, I would actually appreciate feedback like this, although I would appreciate it more if it was communicated in a different way. But since he was very blunt, in that moment I couldn't see it as anything other than criticism, and confirmation that my fears of being a burden were correct. I thanked him for the feedback, and then stepped back a little bit from the table and kind of started to zone out. He then kept telling me to drink water, to which my crush told him to stop because I was an adult and could take care of myself. He then argued with my crush, saying that because I was younger, and I was drunk I might need some extra support. Then another one of the guys at the table, 30s M, said something along the lines of, "Well, she's younger, and people younger than me shouldn't exist," which was a wild fucking thing to say. My jaw dropped. Again, my crush and their girlfriend stood up for me, but at this point, I was so mentally checked out that I barely remember what happened after that. My friend sent me a text and asked if I wanted to go, to which I stood up and said yes. I thanked my crush and their girlfriend for everything. I think I said a quick goodbye to everybody, but I'm not sure, and my friend and I quickly left. I ended up sobbing the whole way home while my friend drove me. I was not only embarrassed, but I was also incredibly angry at this man. He had called me cute just 5 minutes ago, for being awkward and eager to please, and then suddenly it was socially unacceptable. Suddenly, it was annoying. This brought me back to feelings of rage that I have towards the character trope of the manic pixie dream girl, who is crazy enough to be interesting, hot, and fuckable, but too crazy to be able to care about long-term, or to respect once she's no longer attainable or has boundaries. It's something that I've been called before, and although I used to take it as a compliment before I started to unpack what is at the root of that archetype, it is now something that deeply frustrates me. And of course, it is only men in my past who choose to talk about me in such a way. My previous experiences obviously are not this guy's fault, and he obviously did not mean to trigger me in such a way with what was probably just a thoughtless comment. At the same time, the frustration of being praised and looked down upon for the same actions within such a short time period just reminds me of people who fetishize autistic women for their cuteness and quirks, only to turn around and say that they are overdramatic and emotional when they have experiences that go beyond fitting the male gaze. Aside from a text from my crush, thanking me for coming and scheduling another day for us to hang out in the summer, we haven't texted much or talked about what happened at the party. It's normal for them to not answer their texts or text at all since they avoid being online, and I wasn't about to text them for reassurance that I was okay, since honestly, I don't want to be even more annoying than I possibly was. As the days have passed, I've been able to put into perspective that this was a fantastic party. I had some really great conversations, met the incredible partners of my crush, and felt immensely inspired by meeting so many like-minded folk that made it past their 20s. Moving forward, I definitely shouldn't drink that much again, especially around polite company. I also don't plan on going to a party for that long. I didn't realize that it was kind of an open house situation, rather than it starts at 3 = get here at 3. I also have come up with a script for if somebody ever says something like that to me again. Coming up with script is a really good way for me to have an automated response to situations that might take me off guard. I talked to my mom about the whole situation, and she said that it reminded her a lot of when she was younger. She gave me some very valuable advice that I really appreciate, but I still can't help but feel anxious about the next time that I hang out with my crush. Anyone have any advice or another perspective on this situation that might be helpful for me to mull over?